Welcome to Leadership Unfiltered, the podcast where real leaders get real about what it takes to succeed in today's fast-paced corporate world. I'm Dr. Dayan Douse, founder and president of P.R.I.D.E Consulting, a human behavior and development company serving as an executive coach and facilitator, working with organizations to deliver practical ways to evolve teams, advance organizations, and transform cultures. I hold a PhD in organization and management with over 2 decades of leadership experience in Fortune 500 companies. And I'm best-selling co-author of the book, Nothing But Net. I'm joined by my co-host, Phillip Smith. Phillip is a seasoned technology executive with extensive experience leading large-scale engineering teams and driving digital transformation. Over his 25 years of leadership experience, he has held multiple roles from supervisor to vice president. His personal brand is coder by blood, architect by trade, and leader by choice. Every episode will deliver real-world strategies, unfiltered advice, and the tools you'll need to take your leadership to the next level. Let's get started.
In today's episode, we are going to cover the 10 tensions of leadership by Justin Wright. We're going to cover one of those. That one is candor and compassion. There's a tension between candor and compassion. And Justin talks about being direct without being harsh. People do their best work when they feel safe to learn and improve. I want to tell a story where I got it wrong. I thought I was getting it right. I pride myself in being a compassionate leader. But I also have a high bar. Both are true. I have a high bar and I'm compassionate and I really want people to learn. There's a situation where an individual on my team, the work that they put forward didn't meet the bar. And the feedback that I needed to provide, I thought about it. I wanted to make sure that it wasn't coming from a place of frustration, but from a place of learning. And so I delivered the feedback. It fell flat, completely flat. What the person took away was I was not understanding. I was not compassionate. I only cared about everything being perfect all the time. Wow. Is what they walked away from, which was not my intention. But the learning for me came circling back around with the same feedback a little while later. Because I realized the mistake that I made. The mistake that I made was I did not ensure that they were in a position where they could hear the feedback. Yeah. And so although I thought I was being compassionate, I wasn't. Because the first step in being compassionate is making sure that where that person is in a place where they can hear the feedback. Are they in a place where they feel safe enough where they can absorb it as you intend it to deliver it? That is one of the reasons why I always ask before I offer any feedback. I'm definitely candid. That is my default, is to be very direct, very candid, because I think that's helpful and honors and respectful. But they have to be in a place where they can hear it. You also have to check in and make sure that you're in a place where you can deliver it in a way that is compassionate, and it isn't about you being frustrated or angry or off your center. But you also have to make sure that they're in a place where they can receive it. Because if they can't receive it, then no matter how good your intention will be, it will be lost. And so I always open with, I have some feedback. Is this a good time for you? Are you open to hearing it? And that often helps set the stage. And there have been times when I've gotten no. Now is not a good time.
Yes.
It's like, great, no worries. Yes. Really, truly, no worries. And then you say, okay, when would be a good time? And then you check in with that person again. Even if they say, give you a new time, at that new time, check in again. Say, okay, we've reached that time. Whether it's a day, whether it's a couple of days, whether it's 15 minutes. Check in with that person again and say, okay, is now a good time? And once you get that affirmative, then at least you know you're starting from a solid ground in which they can hear you.
Yes, that's good. That's good. And when you started, our conversation was around there are 10 leadership tensions.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you made me think of was the word tension. And we've talked a lot recently around tension, and we'll get into some other episodes around the difference between tension and stress.
Yes.
Which would be a great topic to cover. But when I think about why is compassion and candor a tension, I started to think about some of my experiences as a leader, the tension being on me, and tension usually being a stretch of me. And so in those situations where I needed to be direct, but also have some compassion, there were tense moments, like on a project, which tends to stretch you as a leader because there's high stakes, there are timelines and deliverables that you're trying to ensure we hit as a team. And so that tension is high, which then if you're not careful in how you're giving that feedback or having those conversations, you could be harsh when you don't mean to be. You think you're being direct. And so that causes you to then take a step back, and then the tension starts. Where are you in growing and stretching yourself? The other thing that comes to mind is this is really about you. This topic is about the leader and how you are stretching yourself. And so, like you mentioned, I consider myself a compassionate leader. I try to be direct in my conversations with the team, but it's in those tense moments when you are up against it, when there is a deadline and you got a high stakes customer that you're trying to make sure you deliver, that communication came across as harsh. And it's not me that I'm considering in that. The harshness is the receiver. I think I'm being direct, but it's how they're receiving it that makes it harsh or not.
Yes.
And makes it safe for them to learn and improve versus you've made a mistake, you're letting the team down, you're failing, as opposed to it being a conversation or feedback that they can use. And, again, because it's high stakes, they need to be able to have that safe space to do it quickly. I just remember being on projects and we're up against it. And so I need to have a direct conversation with either the individual or a team member or the team. I'm saying to myself, going into that conversation, I need to be very direct and make sure they understand exactly what I'm saying because we do not have time. But that directness was different than my normal style of leadership because of the tension we were under. And so that became harsh to them. That conversation immediately felt like failure to them. It's because they're like, wait, whoa, this conversation is different from you. And we've been in tension, tough situations before, and you didn't come across this way. But in my mind, I'm being direct. You got to get this. They're like, okay. And so the reaction I took away from that was that didn't feel good to me. Their reaction to me told me something was off. And so now I get to stretch and learn and grow because it took me a minute to figure out what happened in that conversation. And I was like, ooh, that was more than just being direct. That was harsh, right? And they didn't receive it well. And so I had to take a moment, pause, go back and say, okay, here's where we are and here's what we need to do to move forward. That's still being direct, but that now gave them the opportunities to ask questions, to say, okay, now I understand where I'm short, where the gaps are, where the challenges are. And the other piece is in my direct harshness, I don't know if I offered them any support. It was just, this is what has to be done, get it done. That's being direct and harsh with no support. So that's where the harshness really came from when I really tried to unpack it. It wasn't the loud voice or tone. It wasn't the direct message. It was that I left that meeting and didn't give them any support. I didn't say, what do you need from me to close the gap, to meet the challenge? I just said, all right, get it done. And I left. Close that meeting down. So that felt harsh to them. And all the other conversations, that's the way I always close. That's my compassionate piece, is to say, I'm in it with you and I'm here to support you. And what do you tell me what you need and I'll make sure it happens. That's what comes to mind when I think of, in my experience, where I've been direct and harsh. And the harsh was them feeling unsafe and then not getting any support on top of it.
The support piece is what's really important, right? This is something that I learned from Christopher Avery years ago. And of course, given the years that have gone by, this metaphor doesn't work quite the same. Basically, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to poke and prod but not bruise. Metaphor that Christopher Avery gave me so many years ago is so relevant and so important to this leadership tension in terms of how do you make sure that you are pushing but you're not bruising.
Yes.
And that you aren't leaving scars. And what's been difficult for me, one of the things that you said was, how do you handle when you feel like you're not being heard? Like you're the leader,
yes,
and you feel like you're not being heard.
Yes.
Now, there are two Phillips that can show up in that situation. There's the Philip that is frustrated, and tone will shift. The metaphor that comes to mind is you taking a 2x4 to somebody. And I've done that. And that doesn't feel good. Yeah. It doesn't feel good. It's a very emotional reaction.
Yes.
And I try very, very hard, extremely hard, not to do that. But you've got to be aware of that situation, which is what's happening to you when you feel like you're not being heard, right? When it's important that they hear you, because there are times when, from a project perspective, from a restoration of service perspective, from a customer satisfaction perspective, that it's got to get done. Yeah. There are times when you just don't have the luxury time it may take for someone to absorb something more over a normal time frame. How do you make sure that you cover that gap in a way that you're still compassionate? You don't let your emotions run away from you, which is so important. You know where you are, so that you can accurately gauge where the other people are, because you're the leader, and you can't forget that. Right. Even in a one-on-one situation, you can't forget that. And so you want to be able to make sure that no matter what you say in a one-on-one setting, that you wouldn't mind having everyone watch. Yes. While I've definitely grown as a leader in that regard, that's still an area for me to say, I'm good in most situations. It's when I feel like I'm not being heard, like the absorption isn't happening. Yeah. The point isn't landing. And I know that's a time for me to look inward. But in that moment, it's so easy to lay blame. It's so easy to ask yourself, why are you not getting this? Yes. Versus, what do I need to do to help ensure that you get this? Yes. Because that's the question you want to ask. That is the question. What do I need to shift? What do I need to change so that you can get it, so we can get this thing done? Yes. Because that is the responsibility of leadership. But in the moment, just the human condition, as you go through the different stages, you'll get to lay blame. You'll get to trying to find the villain in that story, versus really looking inward and making sure that you're doing everything you can.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. I'm glad you reminded me of our dear friend, Christopher Avery, yes, who has been a coach and a mentor to both of us, yes, over the years, and taught us a lot. And so that poking but not bruising is just key to being a good leader and coach and mentor, because you want to, back to the word tension, the poking is the tension part. Yes. Right? It's to push people, expand them so that they can improve and grow. But you don't want to do that where you're bruising someone's confidence and their ability to be successful and to get the work done. And that's a delicate balance, because you want to push as much as you can, but you got to know right at the moment where you're getting ready to bruise. And it's not it may not be a constant poking, if you will. It's a poke, let them learn, grow, poke a little bit more, poke a little bit more, push a little bit more, until you say, okay, right? They're in a good place. if I do any more, I'm gonna bruise that. So I appreciate you reminding me of that, because that's just a wonderful coaching tool and leadership tool as well.
And the technique that I use is I reinforce to my teams that it's always okay to say I don't know.
Yes.
That is always a valid answer.
Absolutely.
And so what that does is it allows me to push. And then I know when to back up is when they say, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. And I say, that's fine. That's great. That is always a good answer. Because I'd rather you say you don't know when in fact you don't know than for you to make something up or try to present some information that isn't fully baked.
Yes.
Because that may lead us definitely down the wrong path by making it safe to say, I don't know. That's something I'll need to go find out. Or can you help me find out?
Yes.
And so by making that language, safe language, you can always say, I don't know. That gives me the cue to say, okay, I've pushed as far as I can go.
Yes.
And then I can adjust the tactic. Instead of pushing, I can then go, so I can switch from, and this is another Christopher Averyism, I can switch from advocacy to inquiry.
Yes.
And I can start asking questions and start saying, okay, well, have you thought about, and then provide some additional information or additional perspective that they may have. But instead of pushing on their perspective, which is causing them to think, I can switch to more open-ended questions that allows the conversation to open back up, which is really, really what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's good. It just reminded me of the opposite. So we talked about being direct, candor, but that being internalized as harsh. I've had instances where I've been deliberately compassionate without being direct. We all have life that happens to us while we're trying to get work done. And so we all as leaders have had team members come to us with life challenges. And so as a leader, I wanted to make sure I was compassionate in that moment. Right? For whatever their reason was that was outside of work, that was going to cause them a problem with meeting a deadline, with taking on an assignment, with meeting an expectation, but I knew it was important to them, and so I wanted to show compassion. And I did. Where I wasn't direct is what that meant to the organization, to the team, to that person. And so my compassion, full-blown, the person felt it, I fully embraced them, they felt the love, and then we ended the conversation. And I left saying, oh, but what is the new expectation? How are we going to meet the deliverable now? And so while I was compassionate, I wasn't direct, and I definitely wasn't harsh, but there have been times where I've been compassionate without being direct, and it has caused an issue that I now had to go back and fix. So either I have to have a second conversation with that person to now talk about what the new expectations are and the impacts of that, or worst case, I had to then shift those expectations to someone else on the team. Because I failed to have a direct conversation when I needed to. So I've had both sides of that. And when I started to think about this topic, I actually have more examples of the more compassionate and less direct than I do of the direct and harsh. Because again, I try to pride myself as a leader on not being harsh, but I over toggle sometimes on being compassionate and not direct, which leads to additional work, right? Either for myself, for the team, or a second conversation. Well, now that person is like, oh, well, I thought I was just going to go handle what I need to outside of work, and now you're telling me there's expectations as well? Well, yeah, because there's still work to be done, right? And so that is just an example of kind of the flip of that.
Yeah, and I think we are yin and yang in that regard. I am just inherently direct, and so I often have to manage that and moderate that and make sure that I am actually bringing in the compassion piece. An example is I had an employee who had an ill family member, and they were working through that, and I said, okay, no worries, as your leader, I'll get all the information for you. So I did. I said, here's HR, here's how you file for FMLA, here's how you do, and I laid everything out. Like, here's all the things that you need to do so that when or should something unfold, you're in a good place and you're able to handle that without having to worry about work. Yeah. Unfortunately, the person over the course of months did not do any of those things. After repeated prompting, hey, in order for you to be able to put down your work responsibilities, here are the things you'll need to do that you need to do. I can't do them for you. You have to do them. And this person didn't. Their family member ended up passing, and they wanted to take an extended break to deal with that. My response was no. The things that you needed to do, you didn't. And therefore, no. The feedback that I got, and this was a great learning experience for me. I was a supervisor at the time. Of course, escalated up, as I expected it would, because who says no? And so the conversation I was having with the directors at the time was, this is a high performer. And my response was, so if they were a low performer, the no would hold?
Right.
Which caused a whole nother set of conversations to happen. The coaching that I received was around, sometimes people just can't. They know that they should do those things, but because of the situation, they just can't. And that resonated with me. That coaching that I received early in my leadership career around, yes, you did everything you could possibly do as their leader, but you also have to understand they were dealing with something that was really hard.
Yes.
That difficulty might have prevented them from filing the paperwork with HR and doing all the other things that they needed to do. And the coaching was setting aside the performance comment. What do we want to do for this person, for this human that has experienced a tragic loss? Is now the time to hold the rule? Yeah. And I said, that's great. No, now is not the time to hold the rule. The directors didn't want to overrule me, but they were going to.
Yes. They need you to come to that.
But they used that as an opportunity to help me understand why it's important that in those moments that compassion needs to trump the rule.
That's good.
And it was a really good learning for me, an extremely good, valuable learning for me. Yeah. It helped me expand what it means to be a leader in a difficult situation. Yes. And that it is okay in those situations to let compassion trump the rules.
Yes. That's a great story. That is a really good story. I appreciate that. I have had people, I'm sure you have too, in your career, for whatever reason, cry in your office. I think I've done all three in that moment. I was caught off guard by the crying. And they were crying. The reason I was caught off guard is the conversation. They didn't walk in crying. But as they were discussing their interaction with their business partner, the conversation that was had, that brought them to tears. And I was compassionate, or at least I thought I was compassionate, because I handed them some Kleenex. And I said, take a moment, get yourself together. And so that was the compassion part of that conversation, which lasted long enough for them to get themselves together and dry their tears. And then I was very direct in saying, I'm confused at why you're crying over what you've explained to me. We talked through unpacking how they felt. And there was some compassion there and direct conversation around how they might handle that going forward. My harshness came in. And by the way, in that conversation, I felt all three were appropriate. So that's the other point we should make here, that there are some times where you can be compassionate, direct, and harsh in the same conversation, and they are all appropriate.
Yes.
And in this case, the harshness was, I don't want to see you crying no more in this office, in this workplace, over something you just described to me. Because this woman had a family, outside business that was super successful, was doing really well for herself. And I was like, I don't get it. Stop crying and don't cry no more, because there's nothing in this place that should ever make you cry. When you are doing all of these things outside of here that is bigger than anything you just explained to me. She got herself together, heard that, had the direct conversation, was okay with my harsh response. We never had to have that kind of conversation again. Now, we had some more direct conversations, and I was compassionate, of course, in my leadership with her, but we didn't have to have a why are you crying harsh conversation. But that was an instance where all three was appropriate.
The crying, it's a league of their own that says there's no crying in baseball.
Yes.
Which I definitely have been caught off guard by what will cause crying. I know I cried in offices. Ironically enough, my crying in offices have typically been in response to someone taking a 2x4 to me.
That is what the 2x4 is, of not being compassionate, being
they
harsh.
felt that they were being compassionate. That is not how I received it.
Yes.
It was definitely direct. It was definitely harsh, and it was true.
We ain't talk about the whole it being true.
It was true. Mainly because I think if it wasn't true, I probably wouldn't have that reaction.
Right.
But what they were saying was dead on, and it hurt. And so when I've experienced that on the other side, where someone's crying, the thing that I have to hold on to, because this may come as a surprise to people, but I am quite empathetic. And it is easy for me to time travel with someone. And so I have to be extremely deliberate about not time traveling with that person, and I have to be very deliberate that if I'm going to time travel with them, that it is a conscious choice.
Yes.
I don't do that if I am their leader.
Yes.
I can't do that if I'm their leader. Now, if someone's crying in my office and I'm not their leader, there are times when I will time travel with them, and that is another way of showing compassion, of meeting them where they're at. But as a leader, you just can't.
Yes.
And so
talk about, not to interrupt your story, keep that point. You brought up a phrase here in time travel.
Oh.
That I'm not sure everybody knows what you mean when you say time travel.
Yes, thank you. So time traveling is where, so this person is in an emotional state. That emotional state oftentimes has nothing to do with the current situation that they're in. They're reliving something. So they are not in time, in the present with you. They're in the past. And so time traveling is going to their past with them and being in that with them, versus you remaining in the present and anchored to that. When you're that person's leader, you have to remain present. You cannot go to that past experience that they're reliving. You also want to remain compassionate, but you can't go to the past with them. And so although you said keep the point, I've since lost it, but that's okay. We're at time, and in this episode, we talked about one of the 10 tensions of leadership, which was candor and compassion, which is about be direct without being harsh. People do their best work when they feel safe and learn to improve. And I think we've talked a lot about that. Excellent. So until next time. Thanks for tuning in to Leadership Unfiltered. We hope you have found value in our conversation and are ready to take action in your leadership journey. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, share, and leave us a review. And don't forget to connect with us on social media for more leadership insights and resources. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.